All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. All right. Good. Fun. So, welcome to Mahamudra for the people, and apologies for the, um, the experience with the link. It happens, right? It happens all the time with Zoom, it seems, these days. So, thank you for bearing with us. I'm actually very, very excited about today's song, because the next song in this collection of dohas that the 16th Karmapa put together is from the Mahasiddha Maitreya. So this is, one of my favorite ones, and this is one that I translated myself when I wrote Modern Tantric Buddhism, and I translated on Rikers Island, and I spent a good amount of time with the text and with three other translations, which I have on the other side of this room. And so I kind of did my kind of initial translation and then compared against these three others, and then if anybody's ever done translation Tibetan into English, there's a good deal of, actually, I guess you could call it interpretation that has to happen, because there's not really a word for word way of translating Tibetan into English. So, I don't know how well my thing will hold up, but that's the one that I'm going to be teaching from today. Maybe before I begin, though, with this, just check in and see if anybody has any questions about anything. Anything related to Mahamudra, anything related to practice. Yeah. Don't hold back unless you want to. If you want to hold back, you can totally do that. Richard looks a little mischief. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sean. Yeah.
Lama Justin. I'm just also happened to be in Brooklyn, and I only sort of discovered you relatively recently. I was just wondering if I could sort of use the fact that I'm close to you geographically, if you have any non-Zoom things you're up to these days.
Yes. I do typically do one kind of in-person teaching thing a month, but unfortunately in May I can't do that because of my schedule. So I need to go upstate to meet somebody who is a potential funder for the Young Yoga Retreat Center thing this weekend, and then later in the month I'll be going out to LA to teach a retreat associated with the Mirror of Light program that I'm doing with Pure Land Farms. But I'll be back right at the end of the month, and then in June, I think it's June, the end of June, I'll be doing something at a church, Greenpoint Church. Let me see, it's the last, let me just get my calendar up. So the June 24th, which is a Saturday. And then on July 7th, so I've been doing these dark retreat workshops at the Rubin Museum, and we've done two of them. We're going to do another one actually Friday, July 7th. I just got a confirmation about that. And these ones are fun because, we've never done it at this time, but the Rubin is open late. It's open till 10 p.m. on Fridays, and it's like a way different vibe. They have like a DJ, and it's kind of like a little bit of a party kind of scene. So we all thought it would be fun to like trickle those folks into this dark retreat workshop and see what happens. And if there's interest, then I think we might do one the last Friday of July as well. So those will be fun too. I'll be getting complete I haven't had time to respond to the email yet, but provisionally July 7th we'll be doing that. That'll be a lot of fun. And there'll be time to kind of hang out then too. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, it's a hard balance sometimes, like a lot of people want to do things in person, and I get that. And then I have a lot of responsibilities to students all over the world at this point now. So it keeps me tethered to my computer. So yeah, Richard.
How have the dark retreat events at the Reuben been going, Justin? I'm
They've
really
been going
interested to
well.
know.
Yeah, we've done two of them. The first one was interesting because what we had done is we had set up this kind of basically like a presentation of darkness and then images arising from the darkness, kind of like occurs in dark retreat. But the funny thing about it was that projectors produce so much light. So even though they managed to really black out the auditorium almost completely, for all practical purposes, completely blacked out. It wasn't until at the very end of the first presentation that when we turned the projector off, that there was complete darkness for about 5 minutes. And everybody said they wanted more. So the one we did on Saturday, this past Saturday, was about 20 to 21 minutes just of complete darkness. And I led people in some Trekcha instruction. I shared a little bit of the Kunjed Gyalpo, kind of just to kind of get people in the zone, as it were. But people really, really enjoy it. So the next one will be the same. I think we'll have about 20 to 21 minutes of darkness, and then yeah, it's sold out too, which is really great. Both of them sold out. There's a lot of interest. So yeah, they've been good. It's a shame. It's definitely not worth flying from New Zealand. I'll say that, as much as I love them. But maybe I'll come down to New Zealand. We'll take it on the road.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions, Richard, or about anything?
Only I'm not related to Mahamudra particularly, but the the Yangti retreat project is something that interests me a great deal. And is that progressing? How's that looking at the moment?
It's good. We have a how do we say, like a commitment of $200,000 from one donor, and then this weekend rather, I think we'll probably be able to get another amount that size, maybe even a little more. And then with some luck in June, we might be able to do that a third time. And then we might be ready to put an offer in on this property that we have our eye on, a dairy farm in just outside of Rhinebeck.
Outside of where, sorry?
Just outside of Rhinebeck.
Rhinebeck, I don't know that. Is it far from the city?
No, it's what is it? It's like 2 hours tops from the city.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's closer than Hudson.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, knock on wood. And then so we've got the website up with a lot of the online stuff we do, and then over the summer we'll have an online learning platform. And actually there's a new development where it looks like there's a very good shot at us having a completely standalone Vajrayana based CPE program. So like you could do, so if one wants to become a chaplain and only have your background be Vajrayana based, we would be able to provide all of that. And
wow. Fabulous.
Yeah, so I think it's probably the only would be the only standalone Vajrayana CPE program. I'm pretty sure. So
And you'd run that at the retreat center.
yes, that's right. Yeah, it would be mostly online.
Excellent.
And oh, weird. youngtoyoga.com is not up there.
Let the developer know.
No, hold on a second. If you do this, very interesting. Here. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with that link, Eric. You shared, but I see it. Let me know. Do you see it? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what is going on with that. But yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, that's going smoothly so far. I mean, it's a lot to raise all the money. It's a lot of money. But it's coming together. I think, I would like to purchase a property by the end of the year, and I think we'll be able to do that. So yeah. Yeah, and then you should come out, do a retreat.
I'll be there in a couple of months.
Oh, okay. Well then
So I'm really excited to
put all the pressure on me now to have it up and running within a couple of months. Now I need to get off my butt. Yeah, when are you coming to?
in July.
Oh, okay, all right. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe if we do have the second workshop up, that would be fun at the Reuben.
That would be, yeah, I'd love to attend that if I can. The end of July would work, actually. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool.
Good. Yeah. Any other questions or about anything? Okay. All right. Okay, good. So, let's see. I can pick up this book. Okay. So the name of this text is the Mahamudra Sankamita. And actually this was translated, obviously, like I translated it out of Tibetan, but it was translated into Tibetan by Marpa. And the Sankamita means compendium of words, right? So it's, basically the compendium of Mahamudra. And so Maitreya is somebody I love. I've probably spoken quite a bit about him already, but I love him quite a bit. He was Marpa's Mahamudra teacher, although, it may also be the case that they never met in person. It could be that, he just encountered Maitreya in some kind of visionary state or a dream state. Whether or not that's true really ought not have much impact on the value of these kinds of instructions. In fact, I was talking with a friend of mine last week, who's a translator who lives in Nepal, about this kind of idea of there being short lineages and long lineages. And, often when you read about long lineages, it's, something started from whomever and then comes all the way down to us. But you'll occasionally find these experiences of short lineage transmission. And actually, there's a really good example of this with Sakya Pandita, there's the long lineage of Lamdre, which is the kind of major tantric cycle that you find in the Sakya tradition. And so this is, from teacher to student, all the way down, from, I believe, from Hevajra, because it's rooted in the Hevajra Tantra, down to Sakya Pandita. But then there's a short lineage where Sakya Pandita was in retreat, and Virupa came to him in a visionary state and provided him all the instructions on Lamdre, and that's considered the short lineage, right? So sometimes, there is the potential or the possibility of these kind of short lineage practices becoming available. And so in one way, we could maybe say that, Marpa's Mahamudra, instruction from Maitreya, had it been in a visionary state, is then, an example of kind of a shorter lineage kind of practice. Maitreya was a student of Shavaripa. Shavaripa was one of the, major, Indian Mahasiddhas, especially of the Mahamudra tradition. He was also quite brilliant. He, a little bit like Naropa, had been, a major scholar of his time, and left the monastery in order to basically have experience of what he was teaching, as opposed to just, not having any experience. I happened to be talking with somebody last night who we were talking about death and dying, and I was relating a story. Actually, we were talking also about Yangti practice and this kind of idea of maybe bringing dark retreat into this kind of chaplaincy training as a way of getting people actually familiar with actual Bardo experience and not this theoretical thing. And I was relating, co-teaching a retreat on death and dying at one point with, and there were a lot of people there who were very kind of adamant about, this is the way it is. This is the way the Bardo teachings are. This is the way, this is what happens when you experience the Bardo. And even then, I was like, in my mind, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, you don't know. It's like, because it's on paper, right? And that's about all. And it's just fine, it's good. I'm not gonna be a jerk and say that that's not valid or valuable. But having been a chaplain at that time, I knew that you need to be really careful about parroting empty words, right, to people when they are going through, for example, something like the death process. And the same goes for Mahamudra, right? We can easily pick up a book and be like, oh, well, he says this, like, this is what you have to do. And this is the main reason why it's important to engage a teacher with these kinds of things, because without direct experience, and it's not that your practice isn't going to be good, it's more that there are decent likelihoods that you will get perhaps confused or off track or distracted, or not be able to actually have one's blind spots pointed out, which is why having teachers is so important. So Maitreya recognized I don't know shit about this experientially, right? I know the words. And this is just like Naropa's experience with the Dakini, right? So he goes off to search for a guru, and his he has a travel companion, much like Marpa did, and they came across this very unusual person, Shavaripa, who in some instances had these two consorts or companions who would eat the lice out of sometimes their own hair or his hair. This kind of like devotion. And my trip was like, oh, thank you, but no. It's like, you can't do this. Not like, whatever, I just can't take this. So he meets with Shavaripa several times, and each time he's like, oh, no, this is weird. I don't trust you. You're unconventional. Yeah, we see this now with people too, doing, similar kinds of things. And then also, like, according to one of the biographies, I have this one translated by Harnaga Isaacson, my Treva becomes so desperate that he tries to commit suicide on a few occasions because he's like, when am I going to meet an authentic teacher? Like, when is this going to happen? The thing that I really like about this aspect of the story is just this desperation, right? And we've all felt this desperation, kind of, when am I going to change? When is my mind going to change? When is, like, Justin, why do you keep doing this? Why does this keep happening? And so at the very least, when I read these stories, I'm like, oh yes, okay, my own desperation makes sense. So maybe I should actually lean into my own desperation a little more around how unruly my mind is, and how what a bad practitioner I am. So eventually Shavaripa comes up and he's up to him and he's like, what are you doing? Like, you're crazy. Like, why are you doing this? Like, don't you realize I'm right here. You keep asking for this, guru to come, and here I am. And my Chepa is just like, oh my God, like, please, if you're not going to leave me alone, fine. Like, I will finally take empowerment from you, and I will finally listen to your instructions, and just leave me alone. So he does. And he wasn't really too into the empowerment, according to this one biography I have too, where he's just like, oh, this is weird. This guy doesn't seem to know what he's doing. This is what happens when you know too much about too few things, right? You think you know what's right? So he was kind of judging Shavaripa. And so he receives instruction from him. He goes off into the jungle and he practices. And after some time, he recognizes the nature of mind. And then he comes back to Shavaripa and he's like, oh my God, Guruji, like, I figured it out. I had this experience, like, please check my mind. And, Shavaripa's like, okay, fine. Like, let me examine you. And he examined him and he's like, yeah, you got it. And then, my trip was like, yay, like, okay, now. And I don't have the image with me, but it's a screensaver on my phone. It's of Shavaripa, and he's got this peacock feathered skirt on, and he's just like kind of wild. And some people believe that he was actually of kind of like an indigenous tribal origin, actually, and not not within the Buddhist fold, as it were, which is why he kind of looked relatively unconventional. But my Chepa is like, okay, I want to stay here in the jungle with you now. Like, what part of the jungle should I live in? And Shavaripa is like, you are so stupid. Like, like, don't you understand how brilliant your mind is? Like, this isn't the place for you. Like, go back to the monastery and write about this, right? This is, you've had clear experience, and you're learned in, letters and writing. Go do this, and so that's what he did, right? My Chepa went back to the monastery, and he composed a whole host of texts that survive to this day, and still being transmitted to this day. Gyaltsen Rinpoche just gave transmission of a lot of these in March, mid-March into April. So this is still living. I'm still alive. This one, though, is really kind of like one of the kind of key Kaju songs by Maitrepa. So this begins with Maitrepa saying, having bowed to the experience of great bliss, Mahamudra shall be expressed. All phenomenon are one's natural mind. The perceived reality of the external world is rooted in mistaken mind. Like a dream, it is devoid of an entity. It is merely the movement of grasping and wakeful conscious awareness. So, all phenomenon are one's own natural mind. This doesn't necessarily mean that, this mala is just, mind somehow that took the form of a mala, or this pen, or whatever. All these pens I seem to have over here. The perceived reality of the external world is rooted in mistaken mind, right? Mistaken mind meaning, this mistaken relationship to everything, where we have projected everything onto all of this, right? In one way of speaking, we could say that everything that arises in every way, externally, internally, etc., is just a blank canvas, right? A blankness, right? A blankness not meaning it's dull, or a blankness not meaning it has no importance, but a blankness meaning in and of themselves, nothing has particular qualities, nothing has particular value even. And that all of the value, all of the qualities, all of the even the spatial relationships between things is projected onto them, right? We are like, our eyes are like two massive, well, they're not even massive, but they're the size they are. But we can think of them as birth canals, just giving birth to everything, giving birth, giving birth, giving birth, giving birth, giving birth. Right? And our problem is that we give birth and then we're like, all of these things now are mine. All of these things have this importance. All of these things have this meaning. All of these things have these values. All of these things, have all of these qualities. And so the next line, like a dream, right? It is devoid of an entity. Right? So phenomenon is devoid of an entity, just like a dream. Everything that arises in a dream is perceived, experienced. Right? You could imagine dreaming a tiger chasing you, and you're running and running and running and running and running and running, and maybe it catches you and then, it starts to eat your leg, and then you wake up terrified, right? And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, where am I? And you're still kind of disturbed, right? And nothing happened. So in the same way, we will go through the experience of life and we are like, oh my God, there's that thing. Oh my God, there's that. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my God. And it goes and goes and goes and goes. And what's really fascinating to me is, all of the energy expelled or expounded or spent in propping up reality. And the funny thing is that reality doesn't need us to prop it up, right? Phenomena doesn't need us to make it, right? It just is. Leave it alone. Let it be, right? And, pause and look around at everything around you. And consider that nothing here needs you for it to be. And of course, like we want to be, but this all revolves around me because I put all this shit here. I put all of this here. Right? All of this Dharma stuff is here because of me. And I am here because of blah, 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 blah. Right? But it's just here. They're just colors. It's just light. Just sound. Tactile sensation. Temperature, whatever it is. Taste. That's just all. Everything is just the happening of experience. And so, my Tripa says, it is merely the movement of grasping and wakeful conscious awareness. That tug, you can do this in the box, right? So like this tug, right? Grasping, wakeful awareness, grasping, wakeful awareness, grasping, 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 grasping. Our eyes grasp all the time. We have sticky eyeballs. Our ears, oh, I want this kind of thing. Or they're replacing the roof on a building right next to ours. And every morning it sounds like, they are jackhammering me. So all of a sudden, everything is peaceful, drop the kids off at school, come back, and it's and it feels like an attack on me. We do this all the time. All the sounds are me. Why is it affecting me? Why is the temperature like that? So anyway, this starts off, we could say it starts off hot, right? All phenomena are one's own mind. But it's merely the movement of grasping and wakeful conscious awareness. Lacking inherent existence, it is like the manifestation of the wind, empty of essence and just like space. You can't see the wind, right? empty of essence because it's not able to be seen, just like space. All that appears is equally space-like. This is said to be Mahamudra. Right, so when we talk about like ordinary mind or ordinary cognition, this term in Tibetan, tamoki shepa, right? This is this experience of direct experience of phenomenon without conceptual elaboration. Right? This is what Mahamudra is. You're just experiencing, but no story, no agitation. And I think we've discussed this before, this term amanasikara, which also comes from Maitreya, this mental non-elaboration. Right? So it's basically like not lifting a finger, right, in terms of the exertion of effort of defining. It's interesting because actually during the last Dark Retreat workshop at the Reuben, there's a very engaged person who came up to me afterwards who was explaining that they, I offered a little bit of, instruction in Trekcha, which is, for all practical purposes, very similar to Mahamudra. And she's like, oh God, the meditation instruction made such a big difference, but I'm from Iran and the situation there is so intense and I feel guilty, right, engaging in this meditation and letting go completely when there is so much happening in my home country that, and so many people being subjugated, silenced, arrested, and all these other things. Like, how can I possibly engage this without feeling guilty? And my answer to her was, well, I asked her, I was like, are you involved in the political situation there? And she's like, yes, I am. And then I asked, if you found yourself to be highly reactive to everything going on, right? i.e. like noticing every single thing and then getting really wrapped up in that, how useful or how impactful as an organizer would you be, as opposed to actually being able to be very grounded in the clarity of experience, right? And thereby able to manifest energy whichever way it needs to go without the friction of all of the reaction. And that seemed to make sense to her, right? So the whole point is, it's very easy. Everybody seems to go to that place when, we're like, oh, like, everything is mind and, everything that appears is space-like. And they're like, yeah, but what about all the problems? And the point isn't that makes the problems go away. But when we are agitated, we don't respond well. When we are stuck in, heavy-duty attachment, we don't respond as well as we could. When we, experience a lot of fear because of a situation, or hope because of a situation, we're not going to be able to respond, as skillfully, wisely, compassionately as we possibly could if we're just able to recognize the situation as it's happening and then act from that space. Again, in your hand is raised.
I have a question forming, and I'm not completely sure if it's fully formed yet, but it's about like how are sort of like the philosophical kind of underpinnings of our kind of like Western Judeo-Christian kind of perspective kind of influencing us to ask like, what is this, or what is reality in a kind of particular way. Like it's almost like a lens through which so much of our like language and kind of like cultural upbringing really kind of feeds us that question. And I wonder if you know, like when like dropping that kind of like the like that dropping that question and almost like relating to direct experience is what's trying to be pointed out here, or are we trying to understand reality and experience as mind? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way I'm hearing the question, and based on my understanding of this, I mean, we are in one particular way, I think, training ourselves to relate to everything differently than we ever have. Right. And that's uncomfortable. Right. And even though it's uncomfortable, it's possible to do. And I mean, we see how far this has gotten us, right? This way of doing things, right? There's a lot of process stuff, I think you could say, that works, you know, reasonably well depending on the situation, right? But the hardcore, like, you know, binary of good and bad, right and wrong, even in the United States in particular, Republican or Democrat, right? Like conservative or liberal, right? It's just so highly bifurcated that it's predicated on conflict, right? Or all it seems to do is produce conflict. I mean, it's not, it should not be a surprise that after, you know, after all these years in the United States, for example, we can't come up with a third party because everyone's like, oh my God, not a third thing. Like, that's insane. Like, that's not smart. Like, why should we do that? That is risky. You know, because it has to be like this, like, you know, because there's this and there's this, right? And all it does is this, and this is all it ever will do.
One of the things that I feel like I notice in myself, like noticing one change that I've observed in myself, is like almost like I remember when I would listen to something and then think if I agreed with it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And now it almost like doesn't matter whether I agree with it or not. Or even it doesn't matter if something's real or not, if it's being taken as a view by someone or myself or something. It seems like, well, then that's kind of more substance that can be related with. Like denying the reality of that person's perspective doesn't matter if they believe that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you know, to the degree that Mahamudra is not positing another basis for reality, more trying to like kind of see through all of the basis of reality that we have kind of invested in. Does that make sense as like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what we're asking? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we're basically, you know, the practice of Mahamudra is the practice of divesting ourselves from a way of relating to everything that we have grown to be accustomed to, you know, and conditioned to be accustomed to, because all it is conditioning. You know, it's a little bit like, sometimes you find this in family culture, but also kind of, you know, local culture, when somebody does something differently than everybody else does. And everyone's like, well, why are you doing it that way? We all do it this way. come on, get with the program, and then the person who is doing things differently, often feels like an outcast, or they feel like an outsider, or they feel like they don't belong. And so the practice of Mahamudra, and it's very similar with Dzogchen, is confronting the practitioner to do it differently, relate differently than you have. And the thing is like, not only is it okay, but it is more spacious. There is more freedom. There is greater ease. Right? There is less. Consider the prevalence of anxiety in today's modern industrial world, right? Anxiety is a huge problem, and depression is a huge problem. And I think part of the reason why is because everything is so categorized. Everything means everything. Everything is real. Everything is not only real, it's hyper real. It's hyper there. And it is anxiety producing sometimes to begin to try to release oneself from that. But it's also anxiety producing to remain in the process of the way things are right now too. So
it seems like when you create something that's so real and don't recognize you're creating it, then you can't actually change any of it. You can't. There's no way through, or something like that.
it feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. This is why, that last nail of Tilopa's 6 nails, relax. Relax right now and rest. That cuts right into that anxiety, that but I can't. Relax. Be at ease. Right? And then be at ease, and then none of this stuff cares about you. I don't know if anybody's seen, there's that this circulated around on social media a couple of years ago, but there's a teaching by Rigson Shikpo, who just died recently, on Ati Yoga, and it begins with him describing meeting Trungpa Rinpoche early on, like in the before Trungpa came to the States, so this is still in the UK, and asking Trungpa about the meaning of the universe, from the perspective of Ati Yoga. And, Trungpa was like, I'm paraphrasing this, but he was like, there is no meaning. There's no meaning to any of this. It is all just happening. And that is so liberating and so terrifying, depending on your point of orientation, right? Like if you've never heard that before, that is terrifying. Well, what do you mean? And then the next question always is, well, what's preventing everyone from killing everyone? I mean, shoot, like in the United States, I was just reading an article today on the Guardian that we're already set to beat any other record around gun violence, right? So, in the US, already now, right, May 2023, we're almost beat last year. So the counter argument is like, well, all this shit seems to mean stuff, and you still go out and kill people, right? So there's, it's interesting, but like the stories we tell ourselves, right? The narrative structures we weave. And again, I'm not saying, we don't need to be dictatorial about this and just start, destroying narrative structures, right? That's not particularly helpful or skillful, especially if they mean things to other people. But for ourselves, as practitioners, we can begin to do that and rest into the open clarity of what's there and the space. Space can be scary too, but space is also a womb. Right? Space is a place of healing. Space is a place of freedom. And it takes a little bit of adjustment to acclimatize oneself to that experience, especially if we come from places where everything is hyper defined. Yeah, Richard.
I was wondering if you could just clarify something for me, Lama, and that is this term Tamo Geshepa, or ordinary mind, and its relationship to Mahamudra. Is it reasonable to say that Mahamudra is sort of the expression of that, basically, that there's no fundamental difference there, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. It's not something beyond ordinary mind. It's a manifestation of it, is it?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. It's always bugged me for years, actually. So good to have that sorted.
Yeah. Yeah. TGS. Yes. Yeah, there's a funny, very intimidating recorded interaction. I think 16th Karmapa was teaching, I can't remember what he was teaching. I just read the transcript of this where he was teaching something, and one of Trungpa's students asked about Tamo Geshepa, and he got very annoyed, and he was like, "Oh, like, so you think you know, like you know what Tamo Geshepa is?" That's worth looking at. But yeah, I mean, this direct experience. I mean, very similar to Ati Yoga, the removal of observer and observed. That kind of experience of fresh clarity. Right, that is the expression of that is a Tamo Geshepa moment, as it were. So then Maitripa goes on to say, its essence cannot be taught. For this reason, the nature of mind, due to the very nature of Mahamudra, is free from fabrication or transformation. Right, free from fabrication means all of the yarn we spin. Right? Free from transformation. This is the reason why all these tantrikas don't like coming to Mahamudra for the people. Free of transformation, because people are constantly transforming things. Oh, make it better, make it more this, make it more compassionate, make it more wrathful, make it more clear, make it more dynamic, make it more. And all Mahamudra is this. Just letting it be what it is. Right? We don't need to, make it into something else. Everything already is. Just leave it alone. I think sometimes it's that passive quality of the practice that kind of is a secret turn on and turn off to different kinds of people. Right? It's a turn off to those who are like, excuse me for saying this, but they'll use Tantra as a big way of it's like a big penis, like just poking around everything, and really Mahamudra is just stepping back and letting the world take care of itself, right? Letting the universe just be whatever it is. But a lot of these tantrikas, it's like, they're like, I'm changing this and I am changing that, and I'm going to control those ghosts over there. And and it's like, it's a little intense. I mean, I understand why that is attractive to people. And I also understand why that makes Mahamudra and Ati Yoga a little less attractive for those people, because just, Mahamudra and Ati Yoga require people to get out of their own way, right? And if you've already invested all this time and energy into your robes and your ritual kit and, all the stuff, malas made out of, human skull bones and stuff like that, then Mahamudra is a big letdown. Right, but its essence cannot be taught, right? There's the thing. This is like the essence is experienced, and that's what makes it tricky. Right? If it could be taught, then it would be real easy, right? And it is easy, but it's an easefulness that's related to just experiencing, right? Just letting everything happen. By what is realization of the essential nature made? The entirety of appearance is Mahamudra, the great all-pervading Dharmakaya. Relax into the uncontrived nature of being. So everything is of this nature. Everything is of this nature, and the nature of everything is Dharmakaya. Rest into this. It doesn't really help to say, oh, well, everything is Mahamudra, and Mahamudra is Dharmakaya. Therefore, boom, right? We have to rest into it. We have to experience. We have to let go. We have to slow down. We have to stop transforming. Dharmakaya is beyond thought. Naturally remain in meditation without seeking. Meditation rooted in seeking is mistaken mind. Where is it? Oh my God. Where is it now? Where is it now? Like magical illusions in space, meditation and non-meditation has vanished, right? So when we're doing this, it's very hard to distinguish between the two. How could there be freedom or non-freedom in this moment? Right, and this again goes back to the binary, right? You got to throw the binary out the window. Is it meditation or not meditation? Well, the moment you're caught in that moment, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Just let it go. Again, this kind of very good Hatha Yoga instruction. Who cares? Right? Well, is it this or is it that? Who cares? Right? And really ask yourself, who in you is the one who cares about that response? And what is the answer going to do? Is the answer going to alleviate all of your suffering? In such a way, the yogin with realization through knowingness becomes liberated from all virtuous and non-virtuous karmas. So, this should come out soon. Dr. Nita and Robert Thurman gave this talk on Dark Retreat at the Reuben on I don't know, earlier in April, and it was recorded, and everything's being edited right now, and the Reuben will release it when it's ready. But in it, they were taking questions. Dr. Nita was primarily the person taking questions, and somebody had asked, well, here you are talking about Dark Retreat, and you've described that people need to have some kind of stability in their practice in order to engage the practice. Why are you teaching? Like, why are you? It wasn't teaching, but like, why are you talking to a big auditorium full of people about this if it's so secret? Like, what's the, like, how do I have any relationship to this? And he one part of his response was, well, your karma brought you here, and we're talking about Dark Retreat. So there is a connection, right? But this idea about negative, so positive and negative virtue, right, really messes us up, because then we'd be sitting in Mahamudra, right, and we're sitting, like, oh God, when am I going to realize? When am I going to experience clarity? Right? Maybe if I do more this other thing, Vajrasattva. Right? And you've already kind of went all the way down this path, right, away from the point. Right? So this is why this liberation from virtue and non-virtue is so important, because we become so obsessed with virtue. Oh, if I do more virtuous stuff, then I'll experience Mahamudra. But it's a real seductive cleaving into a lopsided relationship to everything that just happens to be. Oh, I want all the virtuous stuff. Like I want to be sitting in this shrine room. I don't want to be sitting in a massive latrine. Well, it's exactly the same. From some being from some other planet where gold-plated stuff is actually considered shit. I am sitting in a shitty room. Right? It's all very, very relative, right? But the big point here is really divesting ourselves from value judgments. Right? So in such a way, the yogini or yogi with realization, through knowing this, becomes liberated from all virtuous and non-virtuous karmas. Kleshas are great wisdoms. Like a fire in a forest, they're the yogin's companions. How can there be going or staying? Remain in solitude. Remaining in solitude, what meditative stability can there be? Right, so the kleshas, all they are is this vivid display of energy. Everything from my anger to my attachment to my jealousy to my lust to my passion to my dullness to my every possible thing that arises. So name something you are feeling right now. Oh, Eric just disappeared. What are you feeling?
Seen.
Yes. Now you can go hide. All right. Larry, what are you feeling right now?
A little confusion.
Okay. Rodrigo, what are you feeling?
Calm.
Calm. Okay. Yeah. And Gail and Jan, what are you feeling? Oh, you're muted.
I've got a low level of irritation and anger.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I'm enjoying the teaching on space,
Yeah. Okay. And Sean.
A little leaning forward into time, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. And Georgia, if you don't mind.
Sure. Let me see if I can make myself visible. Hi.
Hi.
I've been thinking about doubt a lot during your talk. It's so simple. I walk around and sort of try to flash on some teaching or thought and then try to dip into the experience. And I just am filled with doubt that it's the real thing. How can it, I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss something if I go with that teaching, I'm going to miss something important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and Gendon, what are you feeling?
Calm and curious.
Okay. And Richard, what are you feeling?
I'm feeling a little bit of uncertainty about dullness as a display of energy. All of those other kleshas, their kind of luminous and fiery kind of quality is apparent, but dullness, which I slip into quite easily, seems to lack energy, seems to be an expression of non-energy. And so I'm just wondering how that fits with the other kleshas, and it's something that's always kind of puzzled me, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could say that dullness is like blockage, and blockage is not a lot of energy, right? But there's still, oh, you're muted again.
I guess blockage is sort of like occluded energy. Sort of,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, putting Vaseline over my glasses or paint,
yeah.
right? Like there's still the energy of trying to experience, ascertain, right? But it's dulled, right? It's blocked. It's not effective.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, but so the reason why I asked is this point. It's like kleshas are great wisdoms, like a fire in a forest. They're the yogin or yogini's companion, right? And so if we're doing retreat just by ourselves in the forest, we need fire to keep warm, to cook, all this kind of stuff, right? In the same way, like whatever is arising is part of the focal point of our practice, right? Not the exclusive focal point, because we're resting into the experience of all things that are happening. But so let's say, you're in a retreat and yeah, you need fire, right? And so an ember shoots out of your fire and lands on your foot. And very legitimate, like, and then why am I not wearing shoes? And then blah 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 blah, and pain and all of this. And that entire experience then also becomes, the essence of our practice, right? And basically, what my trip is saying here is, don't turn away. Don't turn away from what is right in front of us. Don't turn away from the ordinary. Don't turn away from the mundane. Don't turn away from the boredom. Don't turn away from triteness. Just rest into the experience of what is happening. And this is hard, especially when we've trained to transform things, or even to some extent. Again, I'm not trying to say that mind training is not important, but mind training in this, they're two different languages, right? They fit into the rubric of Buddhism, right? Or Mahayana and, and Hatha Yoga and Mahamudra. It's not that they're mutually exclusive, but it's also not that they're exactly the same thing either, right? The approach, like, it helps to really understand approach. So the large point here is to just leave it alone, right? Our kleshas are wisdoms, right? We don't have to run away from run away from whatever we're experiencing in the moment. If we're feeling love, we don't have to be like, oh my God, like, why am I falling into this habit again? And then we're like, feeling anger. Oh my God, before is love, now it's anger, and then, feeling joy. Oh, like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, if all of that is a problem, then, the one, the one answer is a lobotomy. Right. And that's not what Mahamudra is, right? It's not, we're not lobotomizing ourselves so that I am a robot, right? Like, all of this comes, right? All of this comes. How can there be going or staying, remaining in solitude? What meditative stability can there be? Right? So no going, no staying, right? Remaining in solitude, like, has a lot to do with, I think, with this line, like, this idea of remaining settled in experience, right? The solitude is not necessarily going off into solitude, but the solitude of Mahamudra, the solitude of direct experience, right? The solitude of liberating everything that arises, right? If we're going to start like, okay, well, I'll liberate these things, but not those things, right? Then we start falling into these problems, right? Just remain where you are. one who does not realize the nature of phenomena and mind never becomes liberated from circumstances. Right? So as long as there's this self and other, perceiver perceived, this kind of binary split, we're always going to be stuck in this experience of circumstances. I need the circumstances to be better, more peaceful, more clear, more calm. If only everybody here spoke my language. If only everybody here understood me. If only this situation was more this or more that. So one of my teachers, Paten Rinpoche, who's like a really, really great yogi, lovely person, so generous. He was, he fled Tibet in the 1930s and came down to, he didn't even flee. He was on a kind of pilgrimage and ended up in this valley in Sikkim and really liked it. So he stayed. And so the town is called Pating. There's two towns, Pating and Parapating. And so they just called him Pating Rinpoche, Rinpoche from Pating. And he is a student of Shukseb. So she was one of the greatest, Luncheon Nintik masters of the early part of the 20th century, early part of the 20th century. She was, very accomplished dark retreat practitioner, and she was actually also the student of one of Dr. Nita's teachers. Pating Rinpoche was super respected in Sikkim. He was considered a Turtan, had all of these amazing qualities, and he was surrounded by all of his attendants were like 12 years old, these young monks, and they were like unreliable. They never did anything right. Everything was always messy. Nothing made sense at all. And a lot of people used to be like, why does Rinpoche surround himself by the least reliable attendants ever? And we're saying like 12 is old for some of them. There is like 8-year-old boys being like, okay, let me get, they're acting as secretary. All of these messages would never get to him and all this stuff. And he was happy as a clam. He just did not care, And all these people, like he used to go visit the Chogyal, so the king of Sikkim, and all of these, very, very wealthy people, these people with a lot of power. And then he'd, visit people who were very poor and all this and stay in their homes and do pujas for them. Everybody was just like, what is going on? And he was just didn't matter, And there was one year I went to go visit him. He was staying with some very, 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 very poor family, and the food, was not the best. He got sick. He slipped. He fell. It was, basically not a good situation. But he was like, I'm totally happy here. Like, and all these wealthy, supporters, these jindas were like, oh, come Rinpoche, so at least recover at our place, and then you can go back, but you need to take care. He's like, oh, no, I'm happy wherever I go, And I bring this up just because it is very hard to find people anywhere in the world who are happy wherever they go, right? Everything has to be to, our own individual liking, right? But, Paten Rinpoche is a very good example of, somebody who was a manifestation of Mahamudra, in the sense that, he really didn't care about where he was or what was going on. In fact, there was this one day that the king of Sikkim came to my root teacher's family's house, and we were all there with Paten Rinpoche. And we were like, oh, let's hide from the king, because he was a little bit of like to tell all these long-winded stories and all this stuff. And everyone was like, oh my God, let's get away from him. So we were hiding in a room, and Paten Rinpoche picked up a National Geographic magazine. It was upside down. and he was just looking, pretending to read it. And he couldn't read English, of course, and it was upside down. And I was like, really wished I had a camera, because it was like perfect. It like summed up, his, that experience of liberation, where it's just like, I don't really care. It doesn't matter. Like the intense specificity of me needing everything to be exactly the way I needed to be wasn't there. I never knew that to be. I never saw that manifest, in him at all. So, just, I don't know, just a story that came to mind. And so Maitrapa then goes on to say, what could bind the realization of the essential nature? While undistractedly abiding, do not modify body, speech, or meditation, neither remaining nor not remaining in equanimity. Right? Do not bind, do not control, do not cause a different experience to happen. Just rest at ease. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, when we try to do this, we then, begin to experience the push-pull of expectation, right? Control, affecting things. This is the same thing, like with Padang Rinpoche, he didn't care, at all. It doesn't matter. They talk about liberation, to just let go. In one way, this is the most radical thing anyone could ever do. Just be. There's nothing more liberating than letting everything just stop. I don't know, maybe I'm just tired all the time. But it feels blissful to me. It needs no contrived corrective measure, nor meditative cultivation. Having nothing to establish, know that whatever you experience lacks any real existence. Appearance is naturally liberated Dharma Dhatu. So this is where he's like, he's really throwing us a bone here. I'm going to repeat it. It needs no contrived corrective measure, as we say, nor meditative cultivation. Having nothing to establish, know that whatever you experience lacks any real existence. Appearance is naturally liberated Dharma Dhatu. Realization is self-liberated, great original wakefulness, non-dual, equal to Dharmakaya. Like the continuous flow of a river, however it abides, it is endowed with pure meaning. Likewise, it is continual Buddhahood. Samsara is non-referential great bliss. All phenomena are devoid of an entity. Being empty, the intellect is purified into its own essence. It's got nowhere to go. Mind being beyond concept, there's nothing more to be done. This is the path of all Buddhas. Just stop, slow down. How fortunate. I summarize the heart essence of the teachings. Through this, may all sentient beings without exception reside in Mahamudra. This concludes Maitreya's Mahamudra Sankamita. This is from the mouth of the same Pandita and was translated by the Tibetan translator Marpa Choki Lodro. Translated into English by Repa Dorje Odzer, the heinous aberration himself, at the Mahashmasan known as Rikers Island. Yeah, so beautiful. These last several stanzas. I mean, this is like, it needs no contrived corrective measure nor meditative cultivation. Having nothing to establish, know that whatever you experience lacks any real existence. Appearance is naturally liberated Dharma Dhatu. When we truly experience that, what is your mind like? What does your body feel like? It's so good. Good meditation, good medicine, all of these things. Like the continuous flow of a great river, however it abides, it is endowed with pure meaning. Likewise, it is continual Buddhahood. Samsara is non-referential great bliss. Does anyone have any questions? Reflections? Who is afraid of trusting something like this? Yeah, say more, Eric.
The best I have to draw from my queer lineage to like have the appropriate, that's the only thing that compares to like the risk. But I know, I don't know why I know. I don't care if I was born this way, if something happened to me. I don't know. I don't care. It's what I am. It's what I love. It's what I want. It's what I yearn for. It's what no one needs to give me permission to claim for myself. Now, that's great. But then you got to like get out of the damn closet and live in the world at risk. But that doesn't like, and then for a while, speaking on behalf of like every white little gay boy out there somewhere, right? It's like, it's only gonna be miserable forever, because that's like fair enough, like a fair enough approximation of a real risk. And then eventually, you know, you meet good friends, you're like, nah, like we're free, you know? Yeah. And that's, I trust, like, that's like my only, that's like my pith in terms of like, yeah, it's scary, but like it also is getting better. And it's less about like justifying my freedom and than just like believing in my freedom more than I give a shit about whatever can be said about it. That's my perspective. in this moment.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's ultimately a good one. I mean, one of the kind of quote unquote, like, supportive answers to it, or, solutions, is Sangha, right? I mean, this is what Sangha, like, family, basically, or chosen family in this particular case. Like, if each one of us, right, of everyone here, lived equidistant on other ends of the planet, and it was just us who were the only people in the world who were interested in this practice, yeah, that would be scary as hell, right? And the isolation would be extraordinary, right? But the one thing that we have going for us is there is Sangha, right? There are people who have similar values and similar commitments to similar values, and are engaged in this kind of work as well. And we've all met people who, in one way or another, or one form of another or another, had the bravery to model a different way of being, right? And that's another reason why Mahamudra is so important to engage in, because there are so many people. So kind of, looking, just kind of using your metaphor, Eric, I'm sure there were certain people you might have seen, whether in, popular culture or in your community, or sometimes even in family, right? Where you're like, oh, there's something about this person who is really showing me that I can be myself. And as scary as that is, to step out, of the closet and be oneself, there are these people there, right? And that's what makes these people so important in the world. And this is what, so for example, with Putting Rinpoche, or even Gyaltsen Rinpoche, like, a lot of these people wouldn't survive if they didn't have like an entourage of 8-year-olds like screwing everything up in the case of Putting Rinpoche, or Gyaltsen Rinpoche completely fortified by, hardcore monastic, bureaucracy, right? So most people wither away and die before they even get a chance to meet with him, because the bureaucracy is so intense. That's what also probably keeps, he's a caged bird, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, and that's what also keeps him, probably doing okay, because to let go, let's just say, to let go of binaries in a highly binary driven world is to step into friction, is to step into disappointment, is to step into fear, is to step into heartbreak. And yet, the irony is that once you taste the beauty of that experience, it's worth all the heartbreak in the world. It's worth all of the loneliness. It's worth all of the anxiety. It's worth all of the difficulty, or the fear of not being understood, even by your own family, and, again, I mean, it's this in particular, I think, is a really good topic to begin to address, like, individually. Like, this is scary, right? This is an intense proposition. And although I think we also, probably most of us, know that never engaging this is an even more intense proposition, because then we put shackles on all the limbs, right? And we're stuck, right? We're stuck here. We're stuck in samsara. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, I have another thing. It's sort of related to this, and thanks very much, Eric. I really appreciated that a great deal. There's a weird sort of parallel within Dharma practice that I'm sort of maybe struggling to articulate a little bit. But when I'm sitting and in a sort of some sense of spacious awareness dawns, which it does periodically, All these words, like Mahamudra and Dharmata and Dharmadhatu and Dharmakaya and Trekcho and Dhammogeshepa. And I remember being at a teaching by a Gelugpa nun, and she's saying, well, there's 3 kinds of emptiness. And I'm going, what? All of this language just seems to dissolve into spacious awareness. And I'm unable to distinguish among all these terms. They don't make any sense. So there's this sort of crack opens up between actual experience and these perfectly valid concepts, I'm sure, but they no longer make any sense. And I'm just wondering how to kind of navigate that. I mean, sure, you can just let go of it all and remain in spacious awareness, but that's not my particular skill. It's still come back to, well, what do you mean, Dharmadhatu? How is that? What are you talking about exactly? And what are these 3 kinds of emptiness? And how do they relate to this actual experience? It's going back to George's question, actually. What am I missing here? I've talked enough.
I don't think you're missing anything. I mean, I think that, there's like the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in particular, like is a brilliant one in terms of its concept and pedagogy and all this stuff. But there's a huge difference between concept and pedagogy and direct experience. So let's say I'm feeling love, and someone's like, well, is it puppy love? Or are you love struck? Or are you love sick? Or, are you not even feeling love? You're feeling some other thing, right? That is disguised to appear that way. And, again, like from within the context of the practice of Mahamudra, the classification, when we're kind of analyzing and looking, what am I experiencing? Is this Dharmata or Dharmakaya? What is the difference between these 2? Just let go. I mean, this is where like having trust in the process becomes more important than the ability to define the experience, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, the sense of authenticity of the experience is incontrovertible, but nonetheless, there's this great cloud of language surrounding it. I mean, it's not like crippling or anything. It's just puzzling to me that there's a need for so much differentiation in the way that we talk about a fundamentally very simple experience of appearance emptiness, or
Yeah. But I think that some of this, the varieties of expressions of religious experience, especially within the Buddhist tradition, happen more when you have people from different approaches all talking about things, right? So like within like a straight edge Mahamudra or straight edge Hatha Yoga setting, you get to throw all that shit out. You get to throw it all out and just rest into the direct experience. You take someone like Shabkar. Like Shabkar doesn't really go into the designation of all the different kinds of emptiness.
No.
Right? No. Milarepa doesn't do that either, right? Maitreya doesn't do that. Maitreya's not, and Maitreya was a scholar too. So it's like, he could have been like, oh, well, we see here, like, this relates to, Chandrakirti's position, or this relates to, Nagarjuna. Exactly. And so just stay, this is like not losing the forest for the trees kind of thing, to rest beyond the language of it, to rest beyond the concept of it, And, you know, ultimately, some people don't like this, but I think this is important, is to rest beyond the Buddhism of it, right? To let that go too, because that is, well, that is a conceptual system as well.
Yeah.
You know, and
Could trust it. Yeah.
people will, you know, they'll hold on to it being Buddhist with such fear, because if I let go of that, then what else is there? Well, the same vast, spacious lack of any real, you know, meaning or qualities that my Trapa was just talking about. Let go of it, right? If that is causing you suffering, well, I can't get together with my in-laws because I'm Buddhist and they're not. That's, I mean, all of a sudden your attachment to your liberation is causing your suffering, right? Like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it depends on how, I mean, this really is ultimately, I think, a matter of perspective. Like, you know, for the scholar, there is going to be maybe more of a want or a desire to define, to categorize, to be able to explore, etc. And then for the, you know, quote unquote, yogini or yogi, just letting the question go. And again, letting the question go is hard, especially if we've been trained to preference answering all the questions. I mean, you know, like it's really worth sometimes looking at how intense our conditioning is, so that, you know, because there's still shadows and shades of shadowing, right, around, well, can I really trust this? I can't put it into words. You know, can I really trust this? I don't even know if the words mean anything anymore. And I mean, as you know, like, you know, settling into experiences of complete non-conceptuality, nothing is happening. You know, nothing is coming up, right? And so in that, even the after the fact, well, what was I experiencing, is already like falling down. You know, you've already begun to cleave. You know, this is what makes this so radical, is that it moves us closer and closer to not having to justify any of this either. Because ultimately that's what the language is for, right? Is to justify the experience.
Yeah. 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 I sort of take comfort also in the fact that we've been around in this form for 60, 70, 80,000 years prior to Buddhism developing.
Yes. Yes. No, totally. Yeah, I mean, and to your point, like, and again, this is not something that I think many people will be happy about, but yeah, Buddhism is just pointing out our original state, which
Exactly.
predates. Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not owned by any, you know, set of terms or anything, you know. Yeah, excellent. Well, perhaps we'll pause here. It's super good to see everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being you, and thank you for participating. And maybe right now we can just dedicate the merit to all beings who experience their mind as suffering. May all beings be able to slowly or quickly, as per their typology, be able to recognize that the mind is vast, open, naturally liberated space. All phenomena is naturally liberated as it arises. And that we all have the option to let go. May all sentient beings let go. Take very good care of yourselves. Be well, and I'll see you soon. Bye.